Let's have a look on how Kim Jung Gi uses one-point perspective. Before we start looking on how Kim Jung Gi uses one-point perspective in most of his drawings, first let's be a little bit more aligned on what one-point perspective is and what kind of rules we need to apply within one-point perspective. One-point perspective is the most simple perspective because it's just one vanishing point. We need to have an horizon line with one vanishing point. Now, Kim Jung Gi doesn't draw literally a horizon line. He visualizes this in his head before he starts drawing. Nonetheless, he uses this concept. When we are drawing with a one-point perspective, all the lines that we are drawing that are going towards the vanishing point, towards the horizon, that create depth, these are all converging towards this one vanishing point. So let's say we draw a small house on the left bottom corner. Here we have a house. Now everything that we draw, so all the lines, all the other lines, the straights and the horizontal and the vertical lines are all just straight. But all the lines that are converging towards this vanishing point are converging towards the vanishing point. Everything that we draw which is close to us is big. And everything that we draw that is far away is not only smaller, but is also more squished together. For example, if we draw a house further away and there's a house next to it, these houses are not only smaller, but they're also very close together. Let's see what happens. So what you'll see is that the houses are approximately the same distance from each other, but not in math or not in 2D. This is much closer than this. Now there's a rule you can use when you want to find the middle in one-point perspective, and that is actually on the thirds. So let me explain what I mean with this. So what you'll see is that the middle of this line is actually not where the middle house is, but it's actually on 2/3, right? And this means that when we place something on 2/3, then it's actually in the middle in one-point perspective. Something we need to be mindful of to create depth. This is all nice, of course, that we understand how to draw one-point perspective, but there are a couple of rules that we need to apply when we use one-point perspective, and this is what Kim Jung Gi uses as well. Now, I didn't make these rules myself. I actually found them in the book, How to Think When You Draw, and then are these rules. And I want to zoom in specifically on these three things, because the first thing is that we need to create overlap. The second thing is that we need to create variety. And the third thing is that we need to use straights and curves. What you'll see is that if you don't use variety, if you don't use overlap, and if you don't use straights and curves, then your drawing gets a little bit boring because it's just too predictable. This is not how the real world works. When you start looking on the outside world, you probably see that a lot of things are just a little bit different from each other. For example, two lampposts. One of the lampposts might be a little bit crooked and the other one is damaged or has some rust on it. Now, these small things are exactly what I'm talking about when I'm thinking about variety and straights and curves. Now, overlap is used to create depth, because when we have overlap, then we understand that something is behind something else. Now, this is not so much drawing a nice line or making things look nice. It's more thinking from a design perspective on how to design your drawing. Let's have a look at some drawings of Kim Jung Gi on how he uses these steps in his drawings. So here I've brought two drawings which he made, and as you can obviously see, he's using a lot of one-point perspective in there. So let me show you how he uses that. So here we have a vanishing point. And here we have a vanishing point. And what you'll see is that it's not one exact point in space where all the lines converge to. It's more, you could more see this as an area that he's using where everything is converging to. Now, what are the three U's that we should apply in one-point perspective? Overlap, variety, straights and curves. All right, so let's take them one by one and see how he's using them in these drawings. So let's start with overlap. Now, as you can see, overlap is actually used to create somewhat of a grouping of areas. So in the left drawing, there's like three areas, you could say. There's like a foreground, There is a midground and there's a background. And the same is going on in the other drawing, on which the table with the people on it is the foreground, then we have the midground of the building, and then behind it is the background. Now let's look at variety. So when we look at the left image, what I see already is that there are buildings which have different shapes. Then we have people which are of a different culture. And then there's a plane. So this is already variety. Now when we look at the right drawing, there's also a lot of variety in here. For example, we can also see people, furniture or chairs. There are plants. All the cups on the table have a different size. And then there's of course the buildings. So we have a lot of variety within these drawings. And last but not least, let's have a look at straight and curves. Now as you can see on this left drawing, he's actually using straights for the buildings and for all the interior, and the curves are mainly in the head and in the people themselves. And of course on the top of the plane. Now when we look at the right drawing, what you'll see is that this is actually the same as going on. So the straights are the buildings and the curves are the head of the people, but also the furniture. And even if we look at the tiles on the roof, you'll see that not all the tiles are the exact same distance from each other. They're actually drawn in pretty loosely because tiles are not all identical. They're just in there and they're just, someone has done this by hand, so probably it's not done perfectly. So this is how he's using these 3 rules and how he thinks when he draws. Now what I want to do is I want to go look at one more drawing, this epic drawing on which he's using these 3 rules as well. So let's have a look at overlap. So there are a lot of different areas here. So first of all, we have the foreground, but then we have a second foreground. We have the midground, which are the dragons. Then we have another midground, which is the building. And then we have far in the back these other buildings, which is the background. Now the second step is he using variety? Well, yes. He's using buildings, he's using dragons, and he's using people. And now let's have a look at straights and curves. Now, of course, you can see that the building and the furniture and this car that people are using are creating a lot of straights. But these dragons in here really create the balance in the drawing because there's so much curvature in there that it's actually making the drawing a lot more interesting to look at. Now, I hope, of course, that this video helped you to understand more from a design perspective instead of a drawing perspective on how to look at your drawings. I wish you all the best of luck with drawing like Kim Jung Gi and have a nice day. Bye-bye.